to offer you this lesson from Unity of the Keys Spiritual Center.
Take a deep breath and stretch. So for those of you that were here last week, did y'all stretch this week? Any stretch marks? Any new awareness of those Herodian thoughts or those Pharisaical thoughts that might have been lurking in your mind? So for those of you that weren't here last week, we talked about a scripture that gave us this command, to stretch out our hands and to reach beyond our limited thinking. And we're going to continue to have an open mind and to stretch today our awareness of unlimited possibilities. In the early 1980s, there was, hi Milas, welcome. There was a group of people that I met that had just come back from Ganeshpuri, India. They were close students of Swami Muktananda's, and they had a chanting group in our Unity Church. And one person in particular I love, her name is Mary, and I remember asking her, "What's your spiritual name?" And she said, "Mary." Because everybody had all these exotic names that were given to them by their teacher. And she was really the Divine Mother. And she had such a beautiful voice. And I believed her when she told me that if I listened to this, at the time, tape, before I went to bed at night, that I would sleep better and that it would attune me to a very high vibration. And it was this melodic, slow version of Om Namah Shivaya. And I listened to it for months. And then one night, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I didn't know at the time that it was like kind of a classic Kundalini experience, because I didn't know what that was at the time. But it was an experience where I felt this energy hit the base of my spine and then go all the way up to the top of my head, and I knew everything. I was one with God. I could read hieroglyphics. It was a dream vision experience where I woke up and I was so full of love and light, and I was saying the words, "Do the Atma Bodha." And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't have any idea. But I was studying with a lot of Indian teachers. And so I would always ask them what it meant. And they would go on to this big explanation of the body of light, because that's literally what Atma Bodha means, the body of light. And then one day, I met someone who said to me, "Oh, the Atma Bodha, here. It's 66 verses on enlightenment written by Shankaracharya. You ought to chant it." So, Swami Muktananda and the Siddha Yoga tradition, I have always felt, even though I never met Swami Muktananda, integral to my spiritual path, opening me up to things I never experienced before. And Swami Muktananda's book is called Play of Consciousness. And I had to laugh this morning when I looked inside of it, because it has my spiritual name in it, which is Jagadamba Shakti, means Mother of the Universe. And the date, 8/20/2000. Now, it wasn't the first time I had the book, but this is the 30th anniversary edition of this book. So now it's 50 years. And it's his life story. And the first time that I read it, the only chapter that made any sense to me at all was the chapter called My Confused State of Mind. Because the experience of Swami Muktananda is so inner, and it's in his Indian language even. I mean, there are words for consciousness in the Indian language, in Sanskrit, that we don't have translatable in English. We just have this word consciousness, and they have like 19 levels at least of consciousness that they explain and that you move through when you meditate. And so for me, reading Play of Consciousness the first time was like, I had no experience of that in this lifetime, except for the confused state. The confused state was really great because I have a very vivid dream life, and it was about him being in this state where he would have such a vivid dream when he woke up, he would think it happened. And that's happened to me. I've had those dreams where I just, was just mad about something that actually was just a dream, and I've also had things that happened in dreams that then happened in real life. Once you start meditating, those kind of things happen to you, and you have premonitions. I've always been very intuitive, so the confused state made a lot of sense to me. That was right where I was. So I would like to talk to you a little bit today about this idea of the play of consciousness. And my favorite quote, I'll paraphrase it, from Swami Muktananda is that life is a play of consciousness. That what we see is a reflection of our own awareness. But in reality, everything, all these people, all these plants, all these animals, this whole life is really just the sport of God. And all these things that come to us in our life in various costumes, and shapes and sizes and colors are really just the play of God. And if we become aware of this and we see God in each other, then, when we get to our death, all the angels and the saints, all of our friends and family will be shouting, "Encore, encore," because our life would have been so rich. What is consciousness? What is this idea of play of consciousness? Because if you look in the dictionary, consciousness is simply defined as awareness, or knowing what we know, but also the ways that we habitually form ideas about what we think we know. Charles Fillmore says that a state of consciousness, so he has this idea that we have states of consciousness. Consciousness is just not one unified field. It's a state, and it's a certain phase of mind built upon thinking particular ideas. Many of us have habitual thought patterns, and many of our ideas have been programmed completely into our unconscious, and they play this continuous loop. One thought can lead to a series of thoughts, and it's like hitting the play button in a recording we've been doing since we were 10, maybe earlier, and it's totally nonverbal. And we can be totally unconscious about it. We refer to this as the monkey mind, or the roommate that occupies our mental house. They live in your house and you try to ignore them. And we have these functions of consciousness. We think, we feel, we sense, and we intuit. But our ability to witness our thoughts, our feelings, what we're sensing, and witness even our intuitive abilities, that is a higher level of intelligence. That is what we call the wizard brain. It is probably even more than the brain, as opposed to the lizard brain. Because we do have this part of our brain, the amygdala, that regulates our perception in terms of our safety in the world. So it's neurologically primed to interpret experiences that might get us into trouble. Problem with it is, it stores our memories as if they're true, but it may just have been a completely erroneous thought that had absolutely nothing to do with reality in the mind of a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old or even an adult it could be that the amygdala has categorized and stored something in your memory that is completely false. But it's a very effective system for keeping our species alive. So what we experience when we finally witness and we have that ability to relax and observe and listen to our own body, our own mind, our own consciousness, and align with a higher level of awareness and connect with God, what we experience then is a lot of purification, a lot of crazy things that come up to be healed, a lot of things that come from our memory that make no sense at all. And a lot of people leave the spiritual path in the confused state because who wants that, right? It just seems like it heightens, everything heightens. You get sick, you get crazy, you do impulsive things. If you don't have a teacher or a community, it can be a very unbalanced time in your life. I remember celebrating the day when I could go to South Fallsburg, to the yoga center where now Gurumai Chidvilasananda is in isolation. She doesn't teach anymore. But it used to be this huge place where thousands of people would go for intense, they called them intense spiritual awakening experiences. Silence for months. I mean, really powerful practices. And I remember celebrating the day I didn't get sick. Because every time I went there, I would get sick. And they had a medical staff there, and they would say, it's a beneficial fever. I had no concept of what that meant. It's coming on up. In Unity, we say it's coming on up to move on out. It's sometimes, from maybe going to a massage therapist and then ouch, because it hurts, because you never even noticed how frozen that part of your body was, right? So it appears to get worse, but it's just our perception, because we are noticing it. We're actually noticing how we feel. And then we're more purified after that. We're lighter, we're healthier. Fevers burn a lot away. They boost our immune system. So what appears to be a negative can actually be a very positive thing. So how do we cultivate superconsciousness or Christ consciousness? How do we learn to live in the witness state and experience other heightened states of awareness? One aphorism that I love is, don't eat rocks. Stop doing what is obviously wrong. That is a really big step. If every time you eat bananas you get sick, stop eating them. We've learned enough about emotional states that if you get angry all the time, it's so toxic for you. So a good place to start on the spiritual path is stop it. Find a way to stop it. Don't do that anymore. And it can be anything. It doesn't have to mean that every time you get angry, you sit down and you meditate or you go to a therapist. It might mean that you begin to become aware when you're annoyed and you go jogging. You begin to feel that tightness, that, start to garbage can your mate, and then you take a long walk and go to the beach, There are ways to cope. It's called emotional intelligence. And that has to be cultivated. If you try to spiritually awaken without emotional intelligence, either you'll get really sick or crazy. Because you have to have that strong foundation to witness all the craziness of your mind. We really don't know what we think we know as well as we think we know it. That is one of the ego's great trips. Many people think continuously, meaning they have no stillness of mind. So there's no way for God to get in. There's no way for illumination or, higher thoughts to come in, because you're constantly analyzing, categorizing, judging, and it robs us of so much energy. Just watching YouTube, just watching television or a movie for a few hours can stimulate so much unnecessary cognition and emotions. The brain doesn't realize that's not true. So you're going through all this stuff and you're programming that into your cells, into your brain. So many emotions repeatedly get stored in you that have nothing to do with you. So think about this. Your habits of mind become matter. As your body, your biochemistry, your posture, your health, your habitual thought forms, your ideology, your religion, your emotional patterns become your physiology. Arrogance, hatred, fear, all have a biochemistry, and we should call them a biohazard. Really, if it were a drug, we would condemn it. It's not good for us. There are negative emotions that can, if held onto for a long period of time repetitively, lead to serious illness. So the first thing for us is to relax and to not allow that lizard brain to control us. So whenever we feel anxious or afraid, do something about it. Talk to a friend. Take a nap. Go swimming. Immediately do something about it. Because nothing good, unless you're in a burning building, nothing good comes from anxiety and fear. So here's a new definition of consciousness, and it's really what Swami Muktananda, I think, was talking about when he meant the play of consciousness. It has nothing to do with what we've just talked about so far. I found it in the glossary of his book. It's a higher level of consciousness. Let's call it consciousness with a capital C. Consciousness is the intelligent, supremely independent, divine power that creates, pervades, and supports the entire universe. It's what we affirm every week here. It's our one presence and one power in the universe and in our life, God the good omnipotent. There are other powers. We are experiencing them all the time. But there is no greater power. And in truth, there is no other power. But that would be spiritual truth, not human perception. It gets tricky to explain these things because, as we were talking about this morning, really the direct experience of God is not communicable. We can't give it to each other. It doesn't even help, really, to talk about some of our greatest spiritual experiences. It just kind of dilutes them, because when things become more than physical, then it becomes wordless. So we have to learn to think like a dolphin. That's my solution to this. Dolphins are telepathic communicators. They communicate in pictorial holograms. So a dolphin can communicate to another dolphin miles away through an energy system and through sonar that is more like a hologram. The reason that I know this is from my direct experience with swimming with wild dolphins. I asked them, I said, how do you do this? Like, how do you know, where we are? Like, you seem to know where we are. And how do you know certain people? Like, what is it that enables you to, come to me in my dream? And then I have this experience with you. I was really asking from my heart. And so I woke up in the middle of the night and I saw, as if it was like a hologram like you have on your credit card, one of those dimensional, translucent holograms. I saw the complete day before swimming with dolphins in holograms. And I thought, that's it. That's how they do it. And then I've been reading a lot of research about quantum physics and scientists who are studying dolphins that are from a very higher point of view that are saying the same thing. That dolphins are super conscious beings, and that's how they communicate. They're like the humans in the water, but they've evolved beyond where we currently, most of us, are. So it's consciousness with a capital C that we seek to attain, to cultivate and attune to the consciousness of God. We come together in places like this to break the veil, to connect. Because when we come together, when there are two or more are gathered in the midst of us, spiritual consciousness is exponentially manifest. Have you noticed, if you're in a sustained spiritual group over time, that group seems to carry an energy of its own? I've been praying and meditating with a group for about 40 years, and even if we just come together in a moment of time because we're not physically together anymore, I feel that. I feel that energy. And this is important for us right now, no matter what's going on personally, to affirm that ability in us, to stay connected in that light matrix, to stay connected in that higher attunement. To end the misery that has afflicted the human condition since the beginning of all time, we have to start with ourselves and take responsibility for our own consciousness at any given moment. And that means simply to become vigilant about any negativity in us, any anxiety, anything that we can do to bring peace and calmness to life. The world is a play of universal luminosity. The world is a play of God's energy. And God's energy is playing before our very eyes. So they have a saying in the East, let the dogs bark. Don't engage with things that really don't matter to you. Walk away, step away from the cliff, turn off your cell phone. Have times when you are just completely available. There's nothing else to do but just be. Don't eat rocks. Be wildly creative in your spiritual path. Consciously contemplate the creative manifestation of who you really are in your heart and your soul and your most inspired ideas. Focus on that. Bring that into the world. I do believe that meditation is the key. I think we need to meditate, but it doesn't have to be hours and hours and hours unless you're very intent about waking up and you have the time and the energy to do that. Even just a few minutes of meditation every day, even just 1 hour a week, can transform your life. But beyond that, there are so many other things we can do. We can listen to the birds and the wind and the sounds of nature. We can do yoga or Tai Chi. We can simply stop and breathe. We can do the mantras. You can make one up. Anything that calms you down. You can sing, dance, chant, exercise, take a nap. If you do nothing else, practice the 3 R's. Relax, release, repeat. Say that with me. Relax, release, repeat. It's really important.